The bigger the ship, the longer it might take to turn. But
Yeah. Where do I go from here? What have I done?
in the way that people buy,
I mean, nobody buys a business. Well,
you're listening to the Roofing Success Podcast, a show created to inspire roofing contractors to achieve optimal success in their roofing businesses. I'm the host, Jim Ahlin, the co-author of the books Internet Marketing for Roofing Contractors and The Best Known Roofer. I'm also the co-founder of Roofer Marketers, the leading digital marketing agency for the roofing industry. On each episode, I sit down with industry leaders to talk about their processes, the lessons they've learned, and how to find success in roofing. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. Man, my guest today has heard that probably 200 times.
about that, yeah.
As always, man, leave us a review. My phone number's in the description. Send me a text message. Tell me what you think. This is a cool story, man. I think we have a cool story here, Cason. Like, you had started listening to the podcast a few years ago. It was one of your entry points into learning about the roofing industry. So Cason Curriden with Olympus Roofing out of the Salt Lake City area. How you doing, man?
Doing well. Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is definitely like a full circle moment for me, having kind of gotten my introduction to the roofing industry through this podcast and now being able to come on as a guest. Really cool
Yeah.
opportunity. Thanks.
And you're one of those people that, like, when I said I leave my phone number in the description, like, you reached out.
Yeah.
like, like, you're like, oh, Jim's phone number's there. Let me reach out to him, right? Like, this is,
Yeah.
and that was, even before you were officially in the roofing industry. And so I want to let's let everyone hear your story. Like, Cason, how did you get in the roofing industry?
Man, that's a great question. So, I guess a little bit of background. Growing up, I've always worked in the trades, blue collar of one form or another, and I've also loved entrepreneurship from the time I was really young. My twin brother and I were one of those neighborhood boys pushing the lawnmowers around, little landscaping business, and since then, just different businesses. I ended up studying business strategy and management consulting in college at Brigham Young University out here in Utah, and graduated and knew that I wanted some sort of blend of business management and the trades. So went out to the market and just started looking at every and any business that was for sale here in Utah specifically. And after about a year and a half, it's kind of like when you're shopping for something on Facebook Marketplace, like you scroll through long enough and you can recognize a new
Mm.
listing when it pops up. So I was at that point with businesses, service based businesses, and when I saw Olympus Roofing, I knew kind of what I was looking for, and it had all of the boxes checked for me, and we moved forward in August of 2022. So coming up here on 2 years that since I purchased Olympus Roofing.
So I want to go back because this is, there's two ways to get in the roofing business, right? Like, you start a business or buy a business, and you came in the business acquisition route. Like,
Yep.
where, you know, entrepreneurship from early age. What made you think, man, let me buy something versus let me just build something?
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that we talked a lot about in my education is kind of the make versus buy decision. It's something that entrepreneurs face constantly. We want a new skill set or we want a new ability. We can either make it internally or we can buy it and bolt it on, or start having already kind of acquired that capability. So um, making that decision for myself personally, it was, well, I can either try and start something and bootstrap it and grow, or I can buy a vehicle that's already kind of on the road of success, maybe needs a little tune up, maybe needs to change directions a little bit. And that seemed more attractive to me. It felt like I could get a faster start because I'm definitely an impatient guy. So building it from the ground up oftentimes is a lot slower of a process. I just wanted to jump in and get hit the ground running, so to speak. So that was how that process went for me.
So in thinking about that, what were you hoping for? Like in terms of the buying the business, because what were you hoping for in terms of that jump start?
Yeah. Well, I was definitely hoping for a business that already had a decent reputation and a good foundation of just brand awareness and recognition within the community. I think that's one of the most difficult things to build from scratch. Um, Starting from a point where nobody knows your name is a lot more difficult than starting from a point where you have, in our case, when I bought Olympus, 49 years of history in an area. Um, so that's one thing I was hoping for. Another thing is experienced staff. It's a lot easier to just buy an existing team that already kind of knows what they're doing and is familiar with the business, rather than trying to hire, train, onboard, all of that when you yourself are kind of starting from scratch. So those are the biggest things that I think I was hoping for, was a team that was already functional and a brand that was already recognizable in the community to kind of use as a foundation.
Yeah, and that's another thing to point out is Olympus Roofing had been around for a lot of years.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't a new company, right? Like it wasn't a 3-year-old company that you acquired. It wasn't a 5-year-old company that you acquired. It was a 40-plus-year-old company that you acquired. What what has surprised you in terms of the things that you were hoping for? So let's start with brand recognition. Like, what has surprised you along the way since the acquisition about that aspect of the of what you were hoping to get from it?
Yeah, that's a good question. As far as what's been surprising about the brand recognition, I was a little bit nervous during the acquisition process. Historically, even though Olympus has been around for 49 years at the time that I bought it, it really had maintained a pretty small size over the course of that 49 years. So I was trying to measure and gauge, like, all right, it has been around for a really long time, but it's been pretty small for a really long time. Um, is there still benefit to the Olympus Roofing name, even though it's not one of the massive roofing companies in the Salt Lake area? And I was pleasantly surprised with the level of brand recognition that the name has received. I think, especially for those who have been in the Salt Lake area for a long time,
Mm,
which, when you think about it, we're primarily a retail market. There is some storm work with wind damage and that sort of thing, but we're not considered a storm market at all. So 70-80% of our business is retail. You think about retail customers, the roofs are 25, 30 years old. So it makes sense that the people who've been in those homes, who have lived in those areas for 25, 30 years, they need a roof replacement. Um, they have had a lot more time to see our name, even though we're a
mm.
smaller company, and recognize that brand. So I was definitely pleasantly surprised there, where a lot of our customers were like, "Oh yeah, we've seen Olympus Roofing around. You guys have been around for a long time, and done a lot of work in our neighborhood." And so that was definitely a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, that's one of those things that you just don't know, right? You don't know how, like, what is the reputation of this company in the community? Of course, you can look at Google reviews and you can look at things, but if I remember right from with Olympus, like they didn't focus on a lot of those things, right? Like, because, Google reviews are a newer thing, right? Like, you know,
Right.
when you're 45, 40, 50 years old, you're like, yeah, we didn't, yellow, remember the yellow pages? Like
Yeah.
that was, and so there's definitely an unknown there. I want
Yeah.
to ask the same thing about the staff, right? Because I think a lot of times when they call it a talent acquisition
Hmm.
in the M&A world, and it's like, I want to go buy good people, right? A software company may buy another software company that has a development team that has a high skill set in building certain things. And it may be easier for them to buy that company and pay for that company than to go and rebuild that team because they're so efficient and so proficient at what they do. What are some of the things that surprised you from the team side of things?
Yeah. So some surprises in buying a team, basically, or some things that maybe I would do differently were I to do it again. Um, you're not only buying the skill set of that team, but you're buying the culture of that team as well.
Yeah.
And I was very thorough in evaluating the skill set. I was not thorough enough in evaluating the culture that I was buying. So right off the bat, well, and another note here, I guess, for any business acquisition is you do have to go into the process with a certain level of kind of awareness of the seller and the broker and whoever's involved is going to try and paint this really pretty picture of the business. They want it to be as attractive as possible. So when they're telling you about the employees, even when you're interviewing employees, I know during that acquisition, you don't want to be super cynical or skeptical about the entire process, but you do want to kind of take everything with a grain of salt of like, all right, this is in a perfect world, what this business is going to look like, but we all know that the roofing world is not always perfect. So um, going into that process, I think if I were to do it over again, I would be much more thorough in my cultural analysis of the business that I'm purchasing. We did run into some problems early on where there were some cultural and values mismatch with some of the existing staff that had just never really been addressed by the previous ownership. And so some of the changes that we were making were really putting a heavy emphasis on our culture and our values, clearly articulating those, establishing those as the foundation for growth. And there was definitely some friction there with some of the employees to the point where, one of the oldest sales member of the sales team, we ended up having to let go a couple months after, just because there was such a massive values and cultural mismatch. So that was definitely a surprise, because during the acquisition process, I'm thinking to myself, oh, good, this guy is a guy who I'm going to be able to keep on for a long time and really rely on and depend on. So, yeah, I guess that would be my biggest takeaway from that, and probably biggest surprise is you got to evaluate the skill set, obviously, but you also need to evaluate the culture, because the skill set's no good if the culture doesn't fit.
Yeah, I actually was smiling because I wrote down culture change as you started talking, and then you said the culture, it's what do you think you could ask, or how would you dig into that? How could one help to understand those cultural things on a deeper level?
I think you can do it in a pretty similar way to how you would evaluate any kind of new hire
Mm.
or new employee. You do want to make sure that when you're interviewing, that there's a cultural fit between those employees. So when you're evaluating a business, you're essentially interviewing that business, and that business is interviewing you. Um, so asking questions like, do you guys have a clear set of core values? Do you have a mission statement? How are those values demonstrated, on a weekly basis or a monthly basis? Like, what do you guys do to focus on those things? I think also when you're going into that business and evaluating it, you can look for what I would call cultural artifacts, physical things in the business that portray those values or that mission statement, or whatever cultural element you're looking for. So identifying those things, trying to gauge how much importance they currently put on those things, are definitely going to be ways to bring that out. And then in talking with individual employees, whether they have core values or not, just asking them, tell me if they do have core values, and one of them is maybe communication, for example. Like, what does good communication look like to you? Like, how do you feel like your team does this well currently? um, what are some examples of when communication really saved you guys from big mistakes, or give me some examples of when communication fell through and it caused problems, and how did you guys remedy that? So asking those types of questions, you know, very similar to what I'd imagine a lot of us ask in our interviews with new hires. Definitely going to bring that out.
So one thing that makes me think about it is, this was a company that had been around for a long time. It kind of maintained a certain revenue level, not a huge company. And then when you come in and acquire a company, you have a different goal for it, right? Like you're not coming in to say, hey guys, let's keep doing this, right? Like there's a hey everyone, let's go to there.
Right.
And but like the what I was like, that seems like could create a big gap. Right?
Yeah,
Like,
totally. Yeah, I mean, nobody buys a business. Well, I shouldn't say nobody, but typically you're
yeah,
not buying a business to keep it the same,
yeah,
right? You're buying a business because you see an opportunity to change something, usually, hopefully for the better, you know? And so I found that there was kind of two schools of thought. Uh, the one school of thought with the majority of the employees was, this is great. You know, we have been hungry for this. We've been thirsting for these positive changes. You know, we need somebody to come into the business with the energy and the vision and um, just make it happen. You know, make some of these changes. Um, and the other school of thought was, you know, which was typically like the minority that we did have problems with, was, man, I'm kind of nervous that Cason's going to come in here and make a bunch of changes, and I'm not going to be able to get away with a lot of the stuff that I've been getting away with. And deep down, they know, like, okay, I've been getting away with some stuff that probably wouldn't fly, you know, with the different owner. Um, so that to me didn't really bother me that much because it's something that needed to be addressed anyways.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we did find with most of our employees that transferred over that they were really excited for that change. There are things that they knew needed to happen, and they just needed the right leadership to move in that direction.
How did you express your vision and get them to buy into it? Because if they were like, oh, this sounds like a great idea, how did you get buy-in on that?
So a couple of ways. It definitely takes time. It's not something that, you know, at least in my approach and in my experience, I didn't want to just come in not really knowing a ton about the business from the start. I mean, I knew a lot, enough to feel comfortable purchasing the business, but I hadn't worked with this team
Yeah.
and with this business intimately. And so I didn't want to come in and just say, hey, I know best and we're going to make all of these massive changes. I wanted to kind of observe over time what the biggest struggles and challenges were and the biggest headaches for the existing team, and then approach them and say, you know, here's what I'd like to accomplish. Here's what I think we can accomplish. Um, Here are some of the roadblocks that I've been able to observe over the last few months that it seems like are getting in your way, which means it's getting in our way, you know. Um, so discussing it from that approach of like, here's some of the things I've observed. Do you agree with that this is an issue? Um, and what would you recommend in overcoming this roadblock or this hurdle? And almost 90% of the time, I'd say their recommendation was pretty much exactly what I had in mind as far as what needed to change. And maybe it was kind of a foundational idea, and then some of my ideas could enhance that, but
Hmm.
ultimately the foundation was the same. Of, you know, I really feel like we need better organization in the office with our job files and everything. And I'm like, I was thinking of implementing a CRM like Job Nimbus. And they're like, yeah, that sounds great. You know, like the foundation is the same. We want better organization. We want a more streamlined workflow, and we bring the two ideas together, and it worked awesome. So stuff like that, I think that type of approach worked really well for us in aligning that vision.
Yeah, for sure. Because maybe you could come with solutions to the problems or add options for solutions to the problems,
Yes.
but the problem is still the same, right? Like so getting this problem fixed is something that everyone wants to do. I love that, and you probably have to come in and sit for a bit, right? Like, you kind of came up in the trades in your youth, but like, you weren't a roofer, right? Like, so you had to learn the industry, the like where the bottlenecks are. Um, in terms of like, we look at in terms of like in the M&A world, there's synergies, right? And it, like there's something that a business owner, to buy a business, like we said, to grow, there has to be something that you believe that you can add to that business to get to there, right? Because it's not like, you have the people, but what was that thing that you knew in yourself that you were like, this is my synergy, like I think I have this skill set that I can attach to this business that will help it get to where I want it to go?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it kind of reminds me of a quote that I heard. I wish I could remember who said it, but it was something along the lines of true success comes at the intersection of someone's greatest need and your greatest skill. And so that was kind of the approach that I took into evaluating different businesses was do, does my skill set and what I feel like my talents are match with the greatest needs of this business as it sits currently? And if that's the case, then I really feel like I can make some positive change here. But if the greatest needs of this business are things that I am not confident with, or changes that I don't really know how I would go about, making, then it's not a good fit. And so I kind of went into the acquisition knowing that, okay, I feel like I have a pretty good skill set in creating marketing efficiencies, creating operational efficiencies, looking at a process from kind of the management consulting eye and saying, this is inefficient or this can change. Let's put a plan together, implement that plan, track our performance, and measure the before and after result. And if we do that, we can we can determine whether or not it worked, and then we'll go to the next iteration. And so that's where I felt like my skill set really lied. And I felt like it was a great match for the needs of Olympus Roofing, a business that had remained relatively stagnant for the last 15, 20 years, doing things exactly the same, very little modernization or changes or optimization. So yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, that's perfect, man. That makes a lot of sense. On the other side of that, as you were evaluating businesses, you know, what's the opposite of that, right? When you looked at some of these other businesses and you're like, that's not one that I feel like I could help. What were some of those processes in your mind? Or what conclusions? Like what were some of the, you know, yeah, this one looks like I don't think I could help this one at all.
Yeah, yeah. So I think your role as an owner um, is really to collect and provide resources to your team. And so as I was evaluating businesses, that was really the question of like, am I confident that I have the right resources, or that I can find the right
Hmm.
resources to enhance this business? Um, and from day one in the roofing industry, even prior to the acquisition, during the due diligence period and that sort of thing, I've just been like trying to gather in as many resources as possible. But in doing that, I realized like this is totally possible. There are
Yeah.
tons of resources out there. I'm confident that I can find and evaluate those resources and provide those to my team for them to be able to succeed. Things like your podcast, different relationships that we've built in the industry, different conferences and trade shows and educational events and sales trainings, and different people within my network, and just kind of pooling all of those together to be able to say, when my employees come to me with a problem, it's like, all right, let me turn and like open up the cupboard and choose which resources and which ingredients are going to be best to solve this problem. You give it to the employees and they can run with it. And so the ones that really felt like a bad fit, like, no, I couldn't make this work. It was either I had zero resources to offer from the start personally, or a combination of that, and I have no idea where I could find the resources to tackle this, and I'm not confident that I have the skill set to evaluate whether or not these resources are actually going to be useful. Um, so those were, for me personally, like I don't have a tech or coding or like software background. So I was looking
Yeah.
at some of those businesses. I was like, I can't even speak this language, so, yeah, that's kind of how I looked at
Yeah, for sure. Now the journey began, right? Like all of that happened, then the journey began and you had to learn roofing. What what were some of the biggest surprises along the way in learning the roofing business?
it. Yeah. I guess one of the biggest surprises was how many different uh, roofs there are out there. I guess to put it simply, like, I didn't realize how complex roofing can get with all the different options and different materials and, just thousands and thousands and thousands of choices and details that can potentially be wrapped up into one project. So, although that was a surprise, it has been really fun to learn. Just figure out, so many different ways to provide value to customers. Learn kind of the art of roofing and the trade itself has been really fun. But yeah, definitely surprising to me. You don't think about it because most of the time you're driving around, you look up at a roof, you're like, oh yeah, that looks like a roof,
Yeah.
um, until you're in it and you're like, there are probably like 1,000 different ways you could put on a roof on this house.
It's crazy, right? Like so you had a lot of learning to do. Let's go through some of the like I kind of, like the customer journey. You've heard my presentation on the customer journey and I'd like to get your thoughts on the on some of the lessons you've learned around the through the customer journey. So let's start with like awareness and interesting consideration in the buying journey of a roofing company. Like what lessons have you learned? What are some of the things that have went well for you, didn't go well for you, surprised you, things like that?
Yeah, for me or for a roofing company acquisition, that kind of cut.
Like what you learned as being a roofing owner, like, man, I didn't think that people like I thought that people found out about roofers this way, but they really find out about them this way, or like they became aware of us in this manner, but I never thought that that was going to be that. Or yeah, I was spot on, man. I thought if we, hire roofer marketers and get good SEO, that we'd have a full pipeline. Like, there's my plug right there. But,
It has been
but
that way for
you know,
you
but
know
like what are some of the things that like in this buyer's journey, right, in the way that people buy and hire a roofing contractor, like in that in those early parts of the process where they're becoming aware of the company, they become aware that they have a problem, they start to consider a company. What are some of the learnings that you've had in that part of the customer journey?
Yeah, so it kind of that question kind of makes me reflect on the the report that Job Nimbus generates every year that you and I talked a little bit
Yep.
about on the podcast a couple months ago. But
Yeah.
um, some of the industry stats that we were looking at and that we still kind of try and incorporate on an annual basis, our customers have a really, they're pretty demanding. They have pretty high standards, which is, they're right. This is a massive project, probably one of the biggest expenses that they're going to face as homeowners, and the bar is high in today's day and age. And if you can find a way to meet that demand as a contractor, demands like, we want our contractor to have perfect communication and we want them to be tech enabled. We want to be able to see options and make the purchase decision with all of the options in front of us and be able to weigh pros and cons and compare, bid 1 and 2 and 3, and in some cases like bid 5, 6, 7, 8. um, we want to feel like we're buying from in a lot of cases, they want to feel like they're buying from a businessman, not a construction worker, um, which that at least I can't say there's one benefit or to one or the other, but that's just kind of what our perception has been in the market so far. And so if you can find ways to meet that demand as a business, it's much easier to find success rather than writing those demands off as unrealistic or unachievable or unnecessary. Um, you really have to take them seriously. And so that's been one of our biggest learnings in the awareness and in the kind of buying initial stages of the customer journey is you've got to figure out what those demands are in your specific market, and whether that's residential or commercial or insurance or small town or large city, because they're going to vary market to
Yeah.
market, definitely. But figuring out what those are and making sure that you are getting your brand out there with those things in mind, like, hey, here's all the ways that we meet your demands as a market. Making sure that that's at the forefront of kind of your awareness efforts, whether that's digital marketing or sponsoring the local sports team or whatever efforts you're involved in.
So that sounds like to kind of to summarize that or make it simple, it's like the messaging, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like making your messaging in the marketplace match what what your buyers are wanting from a contractor. So first determining what they want, then determining how to speak to that. Is that what I'm hearing, to simplify it a little bit?
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you really want to take it to the next level, um, a lot of contractors, I think, trust their gut in determining what is it that my homeowners want or what is it that my market wants. And most of the time, that might be accurate, but undoubtedly, you're going to have some things in there that you never considered, or some additional things as far as what your customers want. So I'd say if you really want to take that to the next level, don't just trust your gut. Like, go out and collect some data.
Mm.
Go out and make it a part of your sales process to kind of survey your leads. As a sales team, one of the first things that we do is ask some of those questions, like, what really are you looking for in a contractor? Like, what are some of your most important qualities and characteristics? Like, why did you choose to give us a call? There's a dozen different roofing contractors within a 20-mile radius of your home. Like, what stood out to you about us? And kind of collecting that data as a team of, this is what our customers have told us is important. So now we don't just have to trust our gut. We actually have data that we can use to inform that messaging and awareness.
The power's in the questions, man. Like there's so much power in questions, right? So
Yeah.
the another question for you, like moving into the sales process, like you had to learn how to sell a roof, and in that you had to learn how to estimate, and in that, right, like what have been some of the lessons along the way in that sales journey and learning how to sell roofs?
That's a the process has definitely been an exciting journey. I'd say at the beginning, it definitely felt kind of like faking it till you make it in a certain way of what, there were a lot of conversations that I had with customers where it's like I don't know the answer to that question, but I am 100% confident I can find out for you. So give me 24 hours and I'll get back to you. There's a lot of that, and as long as you're transparent, we
That's right.
found that customers really appreciated that. And again, that goes back to your pool of resources. Do you actually have the resources to answer that question within 24 hours? What arrows do you have in your quiver that you can pull out when you need it? So that was huge for us, having the right relationships and the right network to be able to just, for me personally, to answer those questions. But I think uh, customers, you hear this a lot kind of in the sales world, but customers make the purchase decision emotionally, but they justify it logically.
Mm.
So learning how to connect on that emotional level, um, and get them to the point where emotionally they are ready to choose you as their contractor and get the roof done with you, um, but giving them plenty of logically justifiable reasons to choose you as well. They might feel good about you, but they got to have reasons that they can spout out and say, this is why. They've got a 24-hour turnaround, and they do the little things like putting a gutter sock on my downspout, at the end of the job, or putting a warranty sticker in my garage with my warranty number, or they've got a project manager on site for the duration of the project that can translate between me and the crew. And those are all logical justifications for that emotional decision of, I feel great about Olympus Roofing. And so we've really tried to tailor our sales process to uh, get those emotional commitments, and then just hammer down the logistical justifications behind those emotional commitments.
How is that? You said that you lost that initial salesperson. Did you have to rebuild the entire sales team, or did some people stick around? How did that work for you?
Over time, we have built pretty much a new sales team. Um, Many of whom are coming from either outside of the roofing industry completely, or from a different area of the roofing industry. Like um, some of our sales team currently has spent 10 years in operations. And one of our guys has spent 15 years doing as a repair technician, doing roof repairs. So finding people that just have that skill set and that want to try their hand at sales, we've found a lot of success in.
That's awesome. And I guess that leads to, training and mentoring and things like that you have to build up. But let's move on to the production phase, right? Like now, now you had to learn how to build a roof. You had to
Yeah,
learn how to hire crews. You had to learn how to communicate with customers. You had to learn how to, or best communicate with customers, I should say, right?
right.
You you got to. I'm assuming that you've gotten to learn that man, this is construction and stuff happens. Like,
Yes,
what are
absolutely.
what are some of the things that you've learned in that part of the journey?
Yeah, I'll tell you, there definitely been some days where I'm like, where do I go from here? What have I done? um, those have been very few and far between, fortunately. But I think uh, planning with exactness and executing with flexibility, uh, that's been huge for us. Figuring out every detail possible beforehand, having a nice clean handshake between sales and production, making sure that everybody's on the same page, really just going above and beyond to try and make sure that everyone on the team that's going to touch this job is prepared with the details that they need. That way, when something does go wrong, you've got, instead of just one person to solve the problem, you've got your entire team that right away can just jump in and help solve that issue, or with relative ease get all the information that they need to get up to speed, and come in as a resource to help solve that problem. So that's been huge for us in the construction process. And the actual production part um, is I think internal communication and just our internal process and system to make the information about the job available, so that pretty much anyone on our team can step in and be a problem solver when something comes up.
Yeah, I just had Nick Pagnani on the show recently, and we were talking about that. Like, the way he puts it is like, and him from Job Nimbus, and like,
Yeah,
but it's like he puts it like, if it's not in the CRM and there's not notes about it, like it doesn't exist. Like that's his full on like if this isn't, and you had mentioned it too, like if someone can go in and look at a job and have a full understanding, a full picture without having to have a conversation with someone, that creates some efficiencies. But there's
exactly.
challenges in that, right? It's challenges that everyone is doing the same thing, working in the system the same way, that they're making the notes in the same way. How have you developed process and gotten buy-in from the team around those things?
Yeah, and I would just add one caveat to Nick's statement of, if it's not in the CRM, it doesn't exist. It might not exist in your company, but it definitely exists to the customer. They remember everything. So if it was promised, the customer, it exists to the
It
customer.
exists.
You're going to find out at some point during the process. So, as far as how we've created a process to make sure that happens, a lot of it has been regular uh, adaptation, regular like trial and error almost of on a weekly basis during our all hands meeting where all of our staff gets together. We'll review the jobs from last week and we'll go over the jobs for this week. We have ours on Monday morning. And so in reviewing the jobs from the previous week or really, any of the past jobs, we can identify any breakdowns or areas of friction, and then we talk about it as a team. Like, is there something that we can be doing to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Is there something that we need to tweak? And almost always it's, you know what, yeah, let's add another question on uh, the form that the sales team fills out when they get a signed contract for this one additional detail. Like an example a couple of weeks ago was gable vents. We're big on ventilation and we educate our homeowners a lot on ventilation. And in some cases where the intake's blocked and we're installing a deck air intake and a ridge vent, we've got to block the gable vents in order for that ventilation system to work appropriately. So um, we added a question that we had a customer who's like, "Hey, the salesman said that the gable vent would be blocked, but no one's asked to like come up in my attic space and do that. Are you guys still like planning on doing that?" And we had to figure it out. And the project manager called up the salesman and is like, "Hey, what's he talking about? Like, which gable vents do we need to cover?" And so in talking about that with the team, we're like, "Okay, well, let's just add a question on the form about gable vents. Like, do we need to block any? If so, which side of the house and where?" So that's kind of an example of like we try and iterate on a weekly basis of how can we adjust our forms and our documentation and our process as a team to make this smooth should this scenario arise again in the future.
Yeah, that's where I think a lot of just business owners, not just contractors, get lost. Is it's in the iteration, trying to reach perfection, and just thinking, no, I have to have it perfect. It's not going to be. It won't be perfect until you forever, right? Like like these companies that have been around for 100+ years, like a GE or something like that. Like they're going through the same thing in their company now. It's just iterations. It's always constant improvement, and that allows you the flexibility and the changes in the in the marketplace and the materials and the like in things are going to change. That's the only thing that we can be sure of, right? If there's probably a quote around that I missed, right? Like
Yeah,
there's there's that's it. Like, so we have to just put a process in to deal with that change, right? That
yeah,
okay, it's going to change. So oh man, we learned that we have to have this question asked. But having a process and that open communication, because I think that that's a culture thing also. Instead of the 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 job site supervisor, whoever was on site, getting upset with the salesperson for promising this or saying that, it's that, oh man, what happened here? How do we make it right? How do we work together? How do we get the words the words that came out of the salesperson's mouth into what happens on the job, right?
absolutely.
Because like you said, the customer will remember. The problem with customers' memory is sometimes it's off.
Right.
How do you deal with that? Because we have that, like, especially, like, here's an example, right? A customer gets five roofing contractors to come out and do bids for them. They heard five different pitches. They heard five different. A lot of times those mesh together,
Yeah.
right? How do you clarify your expectations to the homeowner prior to job starting?
That's something that I'd love to spend more time thinking about, and
Yeah.
identifying, are we really doing this the best way possible? But currently, a lot of it comes down to our contract,
Mm,
our agreement. We train our sales team to make sure that everything that was agreed upon verbally is in the proposal, is in the contract, in one place or another. Some of that are just things that we do on every job, and some of that is going to be unique to the individual roof or job. And so there's places for both of those things. There's kind of templatized agreement sections where we say, here's the things that these are standard for us, even if they're different from our competitors. These are standard for us. And then there's really clear areas of customizability for the sales people to mark those unique things. Um, Obviously, they sign that. We have a lot of automations that go out during the production process. When the salesman, when we get a signed contract, they get a text and an email. When the salesman submits all of the production details to the production team, they get a text from the salesman saying, "Hey, we just sent off all your information to the production team. You should be hearing about scheduling soon." If they're sitting in that job status waiting to be scheduled for more than 3 days, we send them another text automatically saying, "Hey, we're still working on scheduling your job. You should hear from us within the next couple of days." So throughout that process, they're getting texts, some of which includes information like, "Hey, just a reminder, we're going to have that dump trailer in your driveway. Make sure that your cars are out of the garage." Or, "Hey, just a reminder, this is the date and time, and this is kind of how many vehicles we're going to be having show up, and um, make sure to prepare in this way. Here's your shingle colors that we've got ordered. Our supplier is going to come drop them off." Um, and so I think just trying to communicate as much as possible and trying to automate that communication so you don't so your customers get a consistent experience. That's one way that we try and do that currently,
yeah.
and just kind of revisit the expectation that was set. Another thought that I had while you were talking about kind of that culture of change and that culture of communication, it's something that you definitely have to be intentional about in creating, because I think there's a lot of companies out there, at least from what I've seen, where maybe there's an identical scenario that we had, where the project manager is unaware of a certain detail that the salesman promised. There's probably a lot of companies out there where the project manager is just going to sit there and be like, "Ugh, the sales team never gives me enough detail. This always, like, this guy always does this, and he's just going to sit there and be mad about it or be frustrated about it every single time. The thought's never going to occur to him that, well, maybe there's something I can do
Mm,
about this to change it. And if that's not a part of your culture, if your employees don't know that their voice is going to be heard and recognized, and that they can contribute in a meaningful way to create positive change, then they're just going to get frustrated by it every single time. It's going to hurt your culture. It's going to hurt your morale. And they're just going to kind of accept that as, like, this is the way it is. Um, until the boss fires that sales guy, I'm going to have to deal with this problem every time. And so if you can create a culture where everyone knows that, hey, I can voice this, and we'll figure out as a team something that works, that's not an inconvenience to anyone, that's going to solve this problem. And I don't have to attack the sales guy publicly in our all hands meeting, but I can bring it up and say, "Hey, I was thinking that we could actually add another question to the form. Are you guys cool with that? Like, is that something you can do to where we avoid this problem in the future, so that we can take care of our customers?" So that's a huge cultural element, where there may be opportunities where your employees just think, like, this is the way it is, but it doesn't have to stay that way.
doesn't have to stay that way. You can change the culture at any point in time. The bigger the ship, the longer it might take to turn. But
Yeah.
boy, I mean, you have to do it. Like, you have to, and in that development of that culture, it produces a lot of great results. Because I go back to one of my favorite analogies about this, but it's Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, and it's employee, self-employed, then you move to business owner, and then you become an investor. And that it's this path And if you want your business to be a business, it has to function without your brain. And this type of having these things built into your culture is how you use the collective brain. It's
Correct.
not just the owner's brain, it's the collective brain. And that collective brain is a lot smarter than you,
Yeah, and has the capability to learn way faster.
way faster,
Yeah.
way faster. So now we move into the loyalty phase. You bought Olympus Roofing because there was an idea or a hope that it had some sort of reputation. And with that reputation, I would assume that you were hoping for maybe some repeat customers, some people that were referring the company. There was something built out there. But now the last phase of the customer journey is that loyalty. What it what type of conscious efforts have you put into um, you know the future referrals and the future loyalty of not just that past database that came with the company, which probably wasn't in a database form, but but
The
like
banker's box of the files. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. All those, like, hey, yeah, the storage unit back there with with the spiral notebooks in it. Yeah. That's our database. So now let's talk about that loyalty phase, because again, the contractors that I see most successful are the ones that turn one into many. And that many is that relationship that happens down the road. That specific customer may not buy a roof again.
Hmm.
They may not buy a roof from you again. But how do you create that loyalty and those referrals, or what have you done? How do you think about that?
Yeah. This is something that I'm really proud of our team. This is an element that I'm really proud of, that our team's created. First thing that comes to mind is, ultimately, especially with some of the manufacturers' warranties and things out there these days, like when somebody buys a roof from you, that home and that customer hopefully is getting married to your company, for 30 years, right? And so we want to make sure that that's really clear to the customer, that this is not just a one-time transaction. It may be a one-time construction process, hopefully, but it's not, we're not going anywhere. We're going to stick around. So one of the things that we've done is we've automated a follow-up with our customers to where when their job gets moved into paid and closed, they get a follow up email at 1 month, 6 months, and annually every year in perpetuity, after their job is finished. So um, the follow up emails, it's all automated. Thanks to Job Nimbus, we can do things like that. But um, the follow up emails are something along the lines of, "Hey, this is Cason from Olympus Roofing. It's been 2 years since we've done your roofing project. I can't believe how fast time flies. We're just checking in to make sure that you're still happy with the roof, that you haven't noticed any problems, and wondering if you wanted us to come take a look and maybe do some preventative maintenance and just touch up that caulking, something along those lines." Then we also have another opportunity in there after we've kind of checked in with them to say, by the way, I'm sure you remember our referral program. We do give $25 gift cards for every referral that you give us that we can actually schedule an appointment with, whether we do business with them or not. And there's the link for them to go and submit referrals. And so that happens annually, after that first year of doing their job. And we've been really surprised since implementing that, how often we get responses to those emails of like, "Thank you so much for checking in. Like, we still love our roof. It looks so great on our house. We just did siding and it just looks perfect, or whatever the case might be. Or, oh yeah, this last winter we had a bunch of ice damming and we didn't get any leaks, but we're interested in some heat cable," or opportunities to like, "Oh, we need gutter guards," or, "Yeah, we'd love for you to come out and just do like a roof tune up, a couple $100 to just touch up all the caulking." So we've gotten great response from those efforts in building that relationship. We also we offer a lifetime workmanship warranty, which is something that is we haven't seen it at all actually in our market from anyone else. But we're talking about our core values, and we're talking about a specific customer in our all hands meeting one week, and we really came to the realization that like most contractors are offering maybe a 5-year workmanship warranty. You know, if there's any problems caused by us installing something wrong, we'll come back and fix it within the first 5 years. In reality, I would hope that most honest, decent contractors, if a customer calls 10, 15, 20 years down the road and they're like, hey, we've been having this problem and we figured out that it's because the flashing wasn't installed right and we're just now seeing the issues. Like, I would hope that most contractors are going to own up to that. You know, they're going to go out and fix it if they did something wrong. We realized like, yeah, we're totally going to do that. Whether it's 10 years down the road or 15 years down the road or 20 years down the road, we're going to stand behind our workmanship. If we caused a problem, we're going to own it. We're not just going to walk away after 5 years and say, oh, you didn't notice, but you know, we have all this, like it's just been dripping in your attic space for 10 years and you just now found the mold, but the workmanship warranty was only for 5. So you're on your own, you know. That's messed up. And so we just decided, you know what, we're just going to give a lifetime workmanship warranty to just show that like if we do something wrong, we're going to own it. We're in it for the long haul. And our customers have really appreciated that, and it's been an awesome kind of unique selling point for us as well to say to be able to speak to that. And something that I you know, it's one of our secret sauces. So I hesitate in sharing it on a podcast that any of my competitors could listen to. But I hope for our market's sake that more people start doing that. I think it really takes care of the homeowner.
Yeah, it does, man. It's really, and I really think of it, you know, we're over 200 episodes of this thing, and really the contractors that I've I say that turn one into many are the most successful. But there's also another thing, and it's about caring for the customer and wanting to do what's right at all times and no matter what. And that's another trait of a lot of contractors that find success. And in having that, the way you described it, in the lifetime warranty, and saying, look, man, we're here. This is us. We're going to do this forever. Like, we're going to take care of you because it's our integrity on the line. That's amazing. So you've heard this in, those 200 and something episodes, and I hope you have a good answer for it.
I've
I
been
don't
thinking
know.
about
I
this.
don't know if you've prepared for this or not. Like, maybe you may have prepared for it because of how many times you've heard this question. But Cason, what is the greatest insight that you can share with our audience that's helped you find success in your roofing business?
You know, I have thought about this question because I knew you were going to ask it. But I think the thing that's come to mind as I've thought about that question is trust yourself and trust your team. When you are faced with a problem, when you're faced with a challenge, when everything seems overwhelming and you don't know what direction to move, maybe you're feeling uncertain and you don't want to let on to your team or your family or whoever that you're in a tough spot. Like, just trust yourself. Trust that you have the skill set, that you have the grit, that you have the pool of people and resources to figure out a way to make it work. Because the reality is, in this industry, you do. You really do. You can reach out to so many people, whether it's your suppliers, whether it's other people in the market, whether it's people from your podcast or people at Job Nimbus, or there are infinite resources out there that you can tap into to help you overcome roadblocks and barriers. So trust yourself that you can find those resources, that you can make it work, that you can figure out a way. And then I think also that, maybe even bigger than that, trust your team. If you are thorough in hiring the right people, if you're paying them good money to utilize a skill set, let them use that skill set. Let them do their work, and trust that they're going to get it done. That if you've worked hard to put your best foot forward, to give them the resources that they need, to build a culture where they know that they can contribute and act. They're gonna do what's in the company's best interest because they know that it's in their best interest as well. So trust in them and letting them do what they're good at, getting out of their way, Those are the two biggest insights that I think have helped us find success: is trust yourself, trust your team, and watch the magic happen.
Awesome, man. It's been fun watching your journey. This has been another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. If you would like to generate more revenue through your digital marketing efforts, please visit roofermarketers.com to get a copy of the book, The Best Known Roofer. Also, check the training section of the website for guides on everything from running effective pay-per-click ads to how to properly set up your Google My Business listing. Thanks for listening.